book discussion, Circe by Madeline Miller. It's a novel, a modern novel, but based on Greek mythology. Circe is the witch sorcerer. She was portrayed in Homer's Odyssey, book 10 and 11. I'm not very familiar with Greek mythology, so I don't know how much of the mythology is actually translated into the book. Nevertheless, it's based on mythology. It's a novel, so everything is fiction, and therefore we don't need to get entangled with the facts. I think what's much more important here is actually two things. One is that this book is a great entry point for people who are not familiar with Greek mythology to get into it, and I think it's incredibly important because Greek mythology is probably the foundation of Western society. And what I mean with that is leaning on Angus Fletcher's idea that literature is really conditioning of the mind. The Greek mythology is sort of the first big invention that followed other inventions, of course, from other former peoples that lived even before the Greeks, in terms of shaping the mind of people, shaping the way people think. And the way people think is eventually how they act, and therefore literature has a real practical purpose. And I think this is definitely one of the big takeaways of this book. The second big takeaway of this book is that, and I think this is not a part of the novel, is let's say that goddess, divinity, and having all powers in the world is not actually what makes life worth living. What makes life worth living are basic things like love, like the fear of death, and the desire to do the impossible, and not having goddess, divinity to do the impossible, but overcoming obstacles and fighting for a goal. And those types of things are really what matters in life, and not having a goddess, divinity. This comes across in the end of the book, which I find it very, very inspiring. Just before I go into the discussion, I just want to remind listeners that we talk about books here for two reasons. One is the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And reading books is not just a pastime for hedge fund managers, it's actually part of the business. And therefore, we think it's incredibly crucial to keep a record of what we're reading. This is not a recommendation list or anything like that. By no means, don't misunderstand this as, well, these are the books you need to read to have a successful hedge fund. This is absolutely not. Everybody's reading list is individual for a good reason. I'm gonna talk about this. This is also again leaning on Angus Fletcher. Everybody interprets stories and adapts to the stories in their own way, because it's their brain that actually takes on the information and then morphs into something that we call interpretation and action. So I think the first reason, again, it's reading is not just a pastime, it is part of the business, because we're in the knowledge business. Second, also, we want to keep a record of what we're reading. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's March 18, 2022. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is up 3.2%. The market is up 1.1%. For the year, we are down 20.2%. The market's down 6.5%. We're underperforming by 13.7%. Just before I go into the book discussion, a main reversal this week was a change in the stock market situation in China. The Chinese stocks have sold off quite substantially, and we've suffered through that through Tesla, and I believe also the algos have been going crazy recently because of the Chinese sell-off, anticipating either another COVID wave or something bad coming from there. Tech stocks have been suffering, growth stocks, and that has been a reversal because the Chinese government has intervened, and we had a huge rally 2 days ago in Hong Kong, and I think that has helped us. What exactly is going on in China is very difficult to decipher. I believe that the COVID situation there is certainly serious. However, we also believe that China will not be able to pursue the zero COVID policy that they have. In other words, they will have to open up lockdowns and things like that, because part of the reason why they have these massive sort of relapses is because nobody's immune there, because they had a zero COVID policy. So they kind of have to now open up and try to adapt to this situation in a more natural way. We believe that this is going to happen. We believe that China as a country also, talking about the other big risk factor, which is the Ukraine aggression by Russia. Over there, China is certainly a risk factor in the sense that they could be helping Russia and therefore be also subdued by sanctions from the West, or they could even do something worse, which is attack Taiwan. We believe that the situation with China is not as serious, and quite simply because China and the US are sort of locked up in an economic coexistence which benefits both. And therefore, the success of both countries on the economic front is kind of a little bit like the nuclear proliferation, which was preventing war between Russia and the US. We believe that the same mutual dependence on success in the economic arena is also preventing war between China and the US, or any kind of massive conflict. Therefore, we believe that China will actually do what's right in a sense that not support Russia and also not invade Taiwan, try to find a middle way to save face, to keep its own political agenda intact, but also at the same time not alienate the West, in particular the US. So we believe that that situation should be mitigated. We have a large exposure to China through Tesla. We also believe that China has more to lose in antagonizing companies like Tesla than Tesla has to lose in case they would have to leave China. And we said that in our episode yesterday. I think businesses have to take a much harder stance against rogue states all across the world. We cannot be held hostage by dictators, rogue states, or any sort of manipulation of the world economy through malignant dictators. I think we need to stand up, and I think businesses are part of that equation, and I think it's happening, and that's a good thing. Like I said, I believe we have a good chance to get back into sort of a situation like we were in post-World War II, when the US and the Western world was in this great situation of hope and purpose, which is best for economic growth. Now let's talk about the book. Circe, written by Madeline Miller. It's a novel based on Greek mythology. So this is not Greek mythology per se. It's a novel. Think of it like an adaptation of something that was written a long time ago. I think it's a great idea, sort of a postmodern thing where you take an antique thing and you put it in a modern context. She's kept it pretty mythological in the sense that there aren't any iPhones or Teslas or anything like that in this book. We are still back in the old times of the Greeks and the gods and the oceans and the sails and the technology and the time and the zeitgeist of those times. I think what Madeline has done is she adapted the story a little bit to her liking in terms of, let's say, the outcome in the end. I'm not familiar with Greek mythology, and I don't think the purpose of this particular episode now is to dissect what is based on Homer and what isn't. I don't care. I'm just discussing this particular novel, which is based on Greek mythology. Let's leave it at that. So Circe is the son of Helios, the sun god. So she's basically the daughter of the sun, and she's a goddess. She's a nymph. She has divine powers, and she does a few things in her life that sort of make her disliked by the gods. She gets exiled to the island of Aiaia, and she becomes the sorceress, the witch of Aiaia. So she has the power of using plants and herbs to put a spell on people. She does that, and throughout the story, things happen, good things, bad things. I don't want to give away the story here, and it's actually not that important. And I think what I find most important about this book is definitely the fact that Greek mythology is sort of the base of modern Western literature. That's where it all started, with Homer and all these guys, and then the Romans, and then we had the Middle Ages, and then the Renaissance. Literature, as we know it in the Western world, is based on this idea that we tell stories to each other, and we embed certain things in the stories, values, for example. We embed tension, we make things interesting. There's the monster, the fight, the war. We leave doors open. So let's say the villain can escape, but also the good guys can win or lose. So a lot of the things that we take for granted today in terms of storytelling, Hollywood, whatnot, I think it's all based on those inventions way back when the Greek mythological writers such as Homer started writing. Now, they, of course, took it from other people, and Angus Fletcher has a book out actually recently where he talks about the biggest invention in literature, where he talks about all these inventions, and he goes back way before the Greeks in terms of inventions. Now, I don't want to get into all this. What I find most interesting, and I'm a very big fan of Angus Fletcher, is the fact that I believe that literature is probably the biggest invention on Earth. It's much bigger than a much bigger invention than the wheel, for example, and things like that. Why is that? Because I believe that literature gives us humans the power to shape our minds. And our minds being shaped then leads to actions. And this is really what's happening here. I think the big takeaway from this book is that Circe, somewhere down the line, is asked, what gives you the power to be a witch? In other words, what gives you the power to shape things and put spells on people and all that stuff? And she said, it's my will. And what she says is basically, it's me, it's my thinking, the shape of my thinking. It's not some sort of divinity, genetic constitution or anything like that. It's my will. I think this is probably the biggest invention in human history, that we humans get away from the idea of prophecy and fate and actually believe in our will. I think this is also the foundation. Through innovations such as, let's say, Christianity, which is that we are, as humans, liberating ourselves from fate and prophecy, and we're actually believing in our own ability to shape our lives. In other words, it is our will that determines how things will be for us, instead of believing in some sort of fate. Now, of course, having said that, I'm sure there's a lot of pushback. People will say, well, what are you talking about? You know, Christians, they believe in God, they do this, they do that. Yes, 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 yes. But again, we're talking here about nuances, about differences in perception. And these things they're not black and white. We go from Greek mythology, which is extremely focused on prophecy and fate, to Circe, which is an innovation within Greek mythology. She's a nymph that takes life into her own matters. She challenges Helios, the god, the sun god, her father. She challenges him. She challenges Athena, the goddess that has, an axe to grind with her. And I don't want to go into details. The point here being that this girl, this woman, this nymph, she is following life through her, um, through her will, through her. Um, she does what she wants. Now, of course, she has to abide to laws. She has to abide to a lot of things that I would say are inhibiting her. She's not doing whatever she wants in a sort of anarchistic way. This is not what this is about. This is much more about Circe pursuing her goals, driven by the fundamental emotion that drives everything, which is love. Circe is driven by love. And I think these are the foundations. I think Madeline Miller, either intentionally or unintentionally, I can't say that, but what she's done here is she laid the foundations for what is to follow, which is particularly written down in the Bible then, which is that love is driving everything, and that is your will, that you have the ability to subdue the earth in a way that you can do what's right for you, and you don't depend on prophecy and fate. I think this is the biggest innovation that I see that the Greek mythology as a whole offers, and Madeline Miller really points that out more precisely in this book. To me, this is the biggest innovation. Innovation using literature as a tool to form the minds of people. This is not just a story for pastime. This is not just entertainment. This is real stuff. This is the way to shape people's actions, because once you believe that somebody like Circe actually has the ability to live and survive, you can then take life into your own hands too. And she says in the book, there is this, to me, crucial scene in the book, which says, what gives you the power to do spells? Is it the fact that you're a goddess? Is it your divinity? No, it's my will. And then there's the other crucial scene in the end of the book where she says that she is now in love with a person. She has kids. She shares the love that mortals share. She is vulnerable. She is a person. She has weaknesses, and she overcomes them. And that is what really makes life worth living. That's kind of the way I see the message here. Again, this is my interpretation. Every book has their way of
uh, influencing someone's brain. And this is, again, Angus Fletcher's big, I think, insight that literature has the ability to sort of, literature is kind of like, it's kind of like the DNA and the RNA thing, where the DNA is, let's say, our brain, and the RNA is literature, and it kind of morphs into our brain, and then comes up with something that is very individual to us. No book has an ultimate influence on people. Even the Bible, or you name it, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, whatever, Anna Karenina, Hemingway, Madeline Miller, any kind of novelist or writer you take, Nietzsche, they will have different interpretations. They have a different effect on people, and the interpretations will be very, very personal. And I think this is not a bug. This is a feature of literature, and this, to me, proves how powerful literature is. Literature is a sort of a software that then is read by our brains and act. So it's kind of like code. It's code that is able to enact actions through us. We're the semiconductors here that take the code and act upon whatever this literature means to us. And literature is, in other words, also a sort of a form of zeitgeist. So whenever Circe lived, the zeitgeist of the Greek mythology, of the Greek society, must have been that believing in the gods, believing in prophecy, believing in fate is all nice, but it's not going to get us anywhere. We need something new. And I think, just as a side note here, I've been watching a lot of the Viking shows on Netflix and all that stuff. And the one thing that really strikes me in, let's say, the Viking culture, the way it's portrayed in those shows, is the same way. These are warriors. They believe in fate. They believe in many gods, and the gods, they have certain prophecies and all that stuff. And there's not enough sort of, I can take my life into my own hands type of thinking. And this is really what, in particular, Christianity brought to the plate and the Bible. And I think that's why it was so successful. To take Louis C.K.'s joke, Christianity won, and he has a sort of a joke where he says, well, if you don't believe it, just ask somebody what year it is, and you will see that Christianity won and all that stuff. And that's all nice. My point here is the following. I don't care who won or didn't win. My question is just, which thought has prevailed over thousands of years? And it's certainly thoughts that were conveyed, let's say, in the Bible, also in other books, in the Torah and in the Quran. And what's most important, I think, about all these things is that we got away from prophecy and being exposed to the gods, and we have more action that we can take as humans, and we can also shape our lives. Now, there's different interpretations. Again, all these books, again, by definition, have different interpretations within our brains, and people sometimes use it for different reasons and all that. But fundamentally, I think the big innovation of Greek mythology as an idea was to shape people's minds. And then what I find interesting in Madeline Miller's book is learning about the way these Greek people have thought, and what their zeitgeist was, is that they were too much dependent on prophecy and fate, and not enough thinking about they can take life into their own hands. This would be my big takeaway from this book. And the other big takeaway is that you, as a person, no matter how powerful you are, no matter if you're a goddess or whatever you are, the big innovation that you need to look for in life so you can have what we call a happy life, it is what actually mortals do, which is love, which is fail, fight, not be almighty. All these things are not something sort of bugs. They're features. Again, they're features of a life. And being perfect, having everything, is not what life is all about. It is not. It is the fallibility. It is the weaknesses that we can overcome with our own minds, with our brains, that actually lead us to having a happy life. And I think this very nicely closes this particular episode with the beginning of Infinity, David Deutsch, our principal stack, that has very similar ideas, of course, not formulated in Greek mythology ways, but more modern ways, but still, it's the same idea. Everything that's possible in the laws of physics can be done. Let's go for it. We can do it. We have the ability. Our will can change the world, and we have to work towards it. We cannot be held hostage by spells of prophecies. We cannot be held hostage by even people like Putin or whatever. We can take life into our own hands. It is happening right now, like I said yesterday in the episode, which is a good thing because what we want to have is a society with hope and purpose, and this is exactly how Circe ends: hope and purpose. Thank you.